Today we're here. We're in New York, so we're doing an in-person one. We're very excited about that. We're at Heritage Bakery in New York, so definitely check them out. I want to give them a shout out for letting us do this here. Really nice place, great food. Our friend Judith took us here yesterday, so appreciate that as well.
Spot.
And Nathan, GM, great guy, so appreciate that. So
Absolutely.
we're out here with Paul Howard, Senior Director at Wincent. Paul, great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being invited onto the podcast.
Yeah.
We've spent a couple of days in New York soaking up the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's great to be here from Europe and see everybody coming together for the Digital Asset Summit, as well as everything that's going on here. It's a really great vibe. So,
Yeah, pretty
thanks.
amazing vibe for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, very cool. Paul, let's jump right into it and talk about maybe your background initially first, and then get into Wincent's story as well.
Yeah, I mean, start with the boring stuff about me. I've been, a computer scientist by trade, and I graduated in the UK, spent 12, 13 years working with Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. I set up let's call it a proprietary trading group with friends who got into Bitcoin quite early, and that really stimulated my interest in what we could do with digital assets transforming the finance industry.
Yeah.
It's culminated in me working in the industry, and I was lucky enough to be offered a spot to work with the guys at Wincent. We're a fully regulated European-based hedge fund, and our operations now span an AUM of over $800 million, and all of that is invested in digital assets.
Wow.
So that's a little bit of context around ourselves and myself and how I got into this space.
Yeah. How'd you fall into the rabbit hole?
Yeah, a friend of mine, a Cambridge PhD student who I'd been friends with since college, opened my eyes to what could happen when you start moving money electronically.
Yeah.
And that was really an eye-opener for me back 12, 13 years ago now.
Yeah. What was the thought from a TradFi perspective? I mean, obviously it's a bit different back in the day, even, what the thought process was. I mean, obviously your eyes are open, but what was your colleagues in the space at the time? What was their perception?
It was wild. I mean, nobody expected that you could move money around electronically back then. And, a lot of, let's say, sort of vested interests and folks who were very dubious about what could happen. I mean, even myself, when I would look back and think, oh, I'll put this much money into Bitcoin, it could go to zero, that horrified me. And so, like a lot of folks back there, it was a case of really validating things and educating people and folks around. And I think that's one of the interesting things that stuck with me was with digital assets, how we can not just learn ourselves, but also educate other people about a new way of doing business and transferring money and value.
Yeah, so let's get into Wincent a little bit. So first question, what does Wincent mean?
That's a great question. I like to look at this as an acronym, really. What we're doing is we're putting down money, we're betting $1 and winning a cent. So we're not bothered about the sort of 99 cents on the dollar, but we're just thinking if we can make a small a small P&L on every trade that we do, that's going to be enough to add up over time that will give us, critical advantage in the space. So for us, being non-directional is key. We're effectively a market maker across multiple exchanges, and we do that with technology and with people who have been switched on to this space for years. Quant PhD backgrounds, math, Olympiads, and a heritage from places as diverse as Google and Facebook bring together all of their brains with technology to help us build up a fund that provides liquidity to the crypto ecosystem.
That's really cool. Kind of going from the progression where you guys started to where you are now, there's obviously been a lot of changes, both market, regulatory, real time here, where we're at today. What are your thoughts on is it a crowded space now for you guys, just given the changes in the market dynamics and from a macro perspective?
Right, and it's interesting you mentioned that because I think you've seen the growth of us over the last 7 years in terms of our AUM and our brand name as well. We're at a stage now where we are a bit more public, and part of that is the OTC business that we've launched. I think if you look at the new entrants that have come into the market, the likes of Ken with Citadel and others, we're hoping that this is going to be a story where we grow the pie rather than the larger portion of it for ourselves. I think anybody who looks at market dynamics and market structure knows that once you hit a certain percentage of the market, you're inevitably having you can call a negative impact, diminishing marginal returns. And for us, it's important that ecosystem grows. The regulations, I think, will help. We're a $2 trillion market cap at the moment. We fully see this going to a $10 trillion market in the next 5 years. So the regulations, the new administration in the US is all very, very positive news for us. And we think that ultimately digital assets will be a part of everybody's portfolio at some point.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. Yeah, let's see kind of where we're going at this point in time.
Yeah, I'd love to say I'm in it for the technology, but it's also the people as well. So
yeah. What's the vibe like in London?
London's very interesting. I spent 20 years in Asia, and moving to London has been very different in the sense that the money is slow. There's a lot of tradition, family office, slow money, as I'd call it. Coming from Hong Kong, there's a much more vibrant VC scene. There's a lot of fast money moving around there. Europe tends to be a very kind of slow beast. It's interesting to see what they've done with MiCA lately. So, new regulations in Europe are trying to set the path going forward. But it's not been an easy ride. I think there's a lot of people who need to be, let's say, brought around or educated into what we're doing here. There's a reason why we're not using gold as currency in the shops anymore, just as there is from not using paper notes so much these days. Well, things will be electronic and the future is going to be digital, and how we embrace that is part of our journey and education for everybody. So London's a great stable place that I think gives a lot of credibility. We are a registered fund in Gibraltar, and that's got a great environment for the digital asset framework and regulations. So, it's no longer one of these things that lives in Panama or in,
Bahamas.
the deepest, darkest depths of the Bahamas or in Indonesia, right? This is something that we're looking at a big scale, and with President Trump's backing, is now very public in the US.
Yeah. So, and you guys decided to kind of move more focus in the US as well, in addition to what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so one of our businesses is the OTC business. We see increasing demand from people to interact with a regulated entity like ours, who've got sources of deep liquidity. There's a lot of folks in the industry. It's, as you mentioned, quite a crowded space for the sort of, smaller, let's call them sort of sub-$100 million guys. For us, we have balance sheets and we've got the technology where we can shift these large blocks. And I think that that's something that we see demand for with institutions coming into the space.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And just curious, how is the global OTC trading landscape, how has it evolved over time?
So I think what we've noticed is the balance sheet that's necessary to do some of these trades has really come to the foreground. We had probably 4 or 5 years ago a lot of counterparties who would talk a big game, and you find out that there's really nothing behind it. So I feel that the OTC space is still got a lot of room to grow, particularly here in the US. We've just acquired a chaperone license for our broker dealing business. And we will, as soon as we have the right licenses, which we expect in the coming quarter, be expanding here and servicing that. But I think it comes down to balance sheet, and technology is a big part of that as well. So you'll end up probably with a more concentration of OTC desks, whereas at the moment you've probably got a prolific, like 200 plus.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Similar to what we have with the exchanges.
Right. Yeah.
I'd see consolidation in both of those spaces.
With your move to the US, What's kind of prompting that aspect of it for you?
Yeah, it's been as I think to quote a famous general in World War II, it's been a sleeping giant. So I feel it's been finally awakened the last 4 or 5 months, and there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for the US now to catch up and jump over the leapfrog a lot of the other regions. If we think about Asia, it's been quite a fragmented market with different regulations in different jurisdictions. That in itself provides an opportunity for people to arbitrage. Europe has sort of tried to unify itself, but slowly, and I think the US has been on the sidelines for a while and is now opening up. It's a great opportunity for the US to really lead, and everybody seems to take direction from what the US does in terms of regulation. Yeah. So yeah, we're really excited to be here and have the opportunity to build not just the fund, but also our liquidity provision and other services.
Yeah. How do you and Wincent think about risk management these days in that context? Would it be trading or just the business as a whole, right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely paramount. I think it's been one of the sad stories about the space is that often these get a lot of publicity. There was a recent hack with an exchange.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the biggest heist that's ever happened in human history, of over $1 billion. For us, founders have always valued our, should we say, secrecy or under the radar way of operating. We didn't have a website until 2 years ago.
Right.
Partly that was from a security perspective.
Right.
And today, as we change the business into not just an obvious fund business, but also into a client-facing agency model, there's a bit of publicity that we have to kind of ride the wave with. But yeah, security is paramount for us. We build our own tech. We have got a group who are, with us from day one. And you can never say never, but we do our best to make sure that we're protecting ourselves from anything that might be silly, which is leaving a laptop in a restaurant, or something a bit more nefarious from an overseas attacker in the cyber world. So yeah, it's something that we take seriously. Difficult for me to comment in depth about what we do to manage that. But yeah, anybody who's involved in this space, I think there's a great lot of solutions out there that people can factor into their business these days.
Yeah, it appears it's only getting better too over time.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, we see some of the custodians now, and there's certain grades and standards for the custodians to operate in, and thankfully, a lot of what was taken out from the exchange the other month was basically a hot wallet. So that provision of being able to store things off of line versus giving full access to your vault, I think this is critical in guarding this.
What do you guys see here in 2025? What do you see kind of with your kind of lens going forward here?
Yeah, I think the US is going to be key. Regulation is going to help shape the space. I think we're going to end up with stable coins being a major force in the industry. The ability to send money within seconds across the globe, not needing a 2 or 3 day settlement cycle is key this year.
Yeah.
That's going to help things such as trade financing. That's really going to, if you think about moving, a 10, 50, $100 million trade with cash that's stuck in the ether for 2 days, that's, in a 5% interest rate environment, that can add up quite quickly on a daily basis. So I see stablecoins as being a really great use case for digital assets. Bitcoin is a great, commodity and store of value for us longer term. It's, a great quote to have that as digital gold. It has all of the hallmarks of being able to, be easily transmutable and maintain value. I think that sort of conversation around the SBR is very interesting for us. We'll see more adoption, I think, and I'd expect there to be some announcements around how tax and other things are looked at with crypto and digital assets here in the US. Finally, I think the sort of the ecosystem will continue to grow and get more institutional adoption with the ETF market picking up. It's very interesting to see all this development.
Absolutely. And to that point, I mean, with high frequency trading, how do you see that evolving relative to regulation changes, ETFs, everything happening in real time, right? Just curious from your perspective.
Yeah, it's a case of investment.
Yeah.
So the model that we see in the FX and the equities world, I think, is still very valid here. We've got a big spend of tech at Wincent. It's a necessary thing to help the liquidity in the ecosystem. Providing that liquidity 24/7 and on the weekend when there might be an errant tweet from somebody.
Right.
Is important, and we're able to meet the demands of people through having great tech and good people.
Yeah.
We're going to see more of that coming into the space. I think the costs of tech will just escalate.
Yeah.
So especially as we get institutions moving in, I can just see that accelerating and more of what is happening in TradFi moving into digital assets.
Yeah, it is interesting about the transparency, because I think in the traditional markets, as we all know, there's a lot of things that get fixed before it hits the public. Whereas, to your point, the hacks that have happened, while painful, it's front and center. People know in real time what's happening. I think there's some comfort, even though it's painful, in what's happening from a back end perspective.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we look at a lot of data sources from Twitter and X all the way to the conventional media, and having everything on chain, or a lot of things on chain these days, helps validate what's being said out there and helps you take a position in the market.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Curious, just from a fund perspective, you guys started, was it 7 years ago, as you mentioned?
7 coming up 8 now.
This is amazing. Congrats there. What advice would you give someone who's launching a fund in 2025, given what you guys have experienced and what you know now, right?
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 types of fund that you have. You've got obviously people who are market neutral like ourselves, and then you've got the long only sort of beta flows, right?
Yeah.
That I think is a more challenging space at the moment. There's been what I would say a bit of a pullback in terms of rewards from venture capital. We've seen, I think now 10,000 plus coins that are, describing themselves as layer 1 or layer 2s.
Yeah.
That I think leads me to think that this kind of DeFi summer that we've had in the past, or this sort of altcoin season, crypto bro thing is not going to happen this time around.
Yeah.
It's difficult to find an edge these days. And it's difficult when, if you look at, the asset class as a whole, the best strategy has just been to hold on to things.
Right.
Yeah.
What would my advice be? Get connected into the industry, learn about the technology, and I think you'll find that there's a gap in the market for a lot of things, and that's where builders are really focused on these times. How is, like, for example, a stable coin helping us transmit value? How can we leverage that in our fund? Given that that's it's going to be $1 today and $1 tomorrow, hopefully.
Yeah.
My advice would be just to get involved with research and people. It's a very open community, and I think that there's a growing pie. As I mentioned, with market cap, if we can grow from 2 to 10 trillion over the next 5 years, it's a lot of opportunities and for people to learn. There's a lot of material out there on the internet. It's I think still a great space for people to be in, especially if you're here in the US.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely.
Are you guys seeing any trends in the industry?
I would say probably the stablecoin trend is a growing trend where we're seeing that being used for trade financing. So trades happening outside of the conventional banking networks. I think a lot of the banks are switching onto this and either doing their own thing with custodians and stablecoins internally, or using DLT technology. That's, I think, probably one of the major trends that are coming sort of year or two. We've also got to, I think, gravitate towards more utility and value projects. It's arguably been a meme hypercycle the last 12 months.
Yeah.
We've seen like all sorts of things just get pushed out there into the space. So I think that meme coin trend will be here with us to stay, but it won't be necessarily growing like it has. And we'll see more utility and networks popping up with everything from payments through to things that we don't even perceive as being on the blockchain will end up on the blockchain. Yeah, trends-wise, I think growing institutional adoption, the ETF market is sort of, fluctuating as it's been the last 3 months, I think is obviously a great thing, and I think we'll see announcements from sovereign wealth countries or funds stepping into the digital asset space. The announcement of an SBR was welcome news, and I think that will set a trend for other countries to follow.
Yeah, almost becomes kind of like game theory.
Yeah, it'll have to. And Bitcoin, the antithesis of it being a finite resource is last one to the party pays the highest price.
Yeah,
so
fascinating time. Be in the space for sure.
Yeah. What criteria does Wincent use in terms of like getting involved in market making for tokens and exchanges?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting area. I think one of the things we've seen is just a proliferation of coins and projects that are launching their own token. It's a space that comes with a bit of risk in the sense that when you back a project and you want to exit, effectively it's a bit like a regular stock. When listed on the capital market, people want to realize their gains. The problem comes when some of these are, options or loans that need to be repaid or struck. That can lead, if there's not enough liquidity in the system, to the project or the value of the token that has been launched crashing. We call it pump and dump, or we call it, sort of something akin to, a dump on retail, effectively. Wincent, set up by three brothers, has always been a bit of what I would describe a kind of white knight of the industry. We've never participated in token market making for projects. It's a very lucrative area, as I understand it. I think it would be, something to look at on a selective basis. But I think just, exercise caution as a regulated fund and with responsibilities and transparency. It's something that we've not actively been, marketing or doing ourselves. So, it's about growing the ecosystem. It's about educating. And I think, for ourselves, doing things the Wincent way is very important for us as a group.
You mentioned the three brothers starting Wincent. Tell us about kind of their background a little bit. Like how did that happen?
Yeah, to be fair, there was two of them to start with. Very much quant math PhD type backgrounds, if that makes sense. The brothers' family is very well versed in physics and maths from that pedigree, and they brought in a lot of folks who have obviously come from a background of the Olympiads of Eastern Europe and math competitions.
Yes.
So they've created a company that has got similar values. Everybody who comes in has got to pass a technical interview, the likes of which would probably, make a lot of folks sort of, how do I say, question their own capabilities, maybe. But everybody who comes into the team has to understand, and whether you're doing like business development or you're doing trading. How does the trade work? What is a digital asset? What is Bitcoin? How does it have value, etc.? So they've created a company that has, really brought in a lot of great minds, and it's a very open group. We have a very open culture internally, and I think that's transparency is something that we're bringing to the space. It's a little different, and we reward that as well. We go back to the Olympiads, we go back to the universities, and we hire from their graduate programs and competitions. So we like to think that we're able to cultivate a small space that helps people who are into that stuff really grow and enjoy their career.
That's great.
That's cool. The Math Olympics. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've always thought Olympics were those things that you do when you're running around or swimming in the.
That's great. Yeah.
Anything in the space that gets you really excited?
I would say the adoption from assets as diverse as digital assets being accepted by institutions is really interesting. It's like, we see some big banks and some big financial institutions coming into the space. The repeal of SAB 121, I think, is a great step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I just like to see us, breaking down the barriers of trade and cost for people. it's ridiculous that you've got to pay sometimes like a 900 basis points charge on a money remittance, or that I send something from my bank account on a Monday and it arrives 5 days later on a Friday afternoon. It's just an insanity in the modern world.
That's right.
It is.
Yeah.
Really so is. I think, that space, I think that's what's really exciting for me, is seeing us change that with digital assets, but also encourage the existing institutions to, buckle up and get with the program. Tesla came around not because they were the first to invent an electric car, but nobody else was doing it at scale. Even though they had the technology and the know-how and the money, it takes an incumbent to move things forward. And I think digital assets are helping push financial institutions to innovate. So that's a cool thing, and lower cost.
Paul, really appreciate you being here with us today. Where could people go to connect with you, Wincent, and also who are the type of clients, people you guys are looking to connect with?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think for us, the potential of what digital assets can do is going to become a lot more public. We're going to see a lot of the brokers and financial institutions adopting cryptocurrency. We as a market maker and a liquidity provider are able to assist foundations, projects, and companies with their crypto transfers, on-ramping, off-ramping as it's called. We have a small website and a small LinkedIn profile, and anybody who ever wants to come and visit us in Slovakia is always welcome.
Oh yeah.
We're obviously at a lot of events. We'll be at Token coming up in Dubai, and again at some of the things that are happening in Asia. And so, come and meet us in person, and if not, hit us up on LinkedIn or on the internet. We're always there. So.
Yeah, well, this has been great. Paul will make sure to include all that in the show notes as well, your contact info.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Great to have you here, Paul. And thanks again to Heritage in New York. Check them out downtown.
Great spot to go.
I think Midtown area. But thanks again to Heritage, and thanks again to Paul.